The Korean Dominion had ruled the stars for millennia, their dominance unquestioned and their technology unmatched. To them, Earth was an anomaly, a backwater planet filled with primitive creatures clinging to outdated tools of war. As the Galactic Council deliberated Earth's fate, the Korean representative, General Varlik Desir, sneered at the human delegation. His voice dripped with contempt as he addressed the assembly. "These humans," he began, pausing as if even the word was distasteful, "still rely on projectiles made of metal. Their weapons are relics, and their strategy is non-existent. To consider them a threat is an insult to the Dominion." The gathered aliens nodded in agreement, their disdain for the humans evident. Varlik's confidence was unshakable. After all, no civilization relying on such crude armaments could hope to stand against the might of energy shields, plasma cannons, and gravitic fighters. Humanity, however, did not cower. Captain Raphael Drake, standing among the human delegation, remained silent during Varlik's tirade. His steel-gray eyes scanned the room, assessing every alien present. When Varlik finally paused, Raphael stepped forward, his boots echoing in the vast chamber. "General," Raphael began, his voice calm yet firm, "you mistake simplicity for weakness. Earth has seen countless wars, endured invasions, and survived cataclysms. Do not think for a moment that we are unprepared." The room fell silent. Raphael was no diplomat, and his blunt tone was out of place among the council's usual decorum. Varlik chuckled, shaking his head. "Unprepared? Captain Drake, your people are fossils, clinging to barbaric tools. You may resist, but resistance will only prolong your suffering." Raphael did not flinch. "We'll see." The declaration hung in the air like a challenge, and the council quickly adjourned, unwilling to witness the growing tension. As Raphael returned to Earth, he carried with him the weight of responsibility. The invasion was no longer a question of if, but when. Back on Earth, in the heart of a military base hidden deep within the Appalachian Mountains, Raphael addressed his men. The room was filled with veterans, each bearing the scars of battles fought on Earth's soil. "They think we're weak," Raphael began, pacing before the assembled soldiers. "They think our weapons are outdated, our strategies archaic. But they don't know what we're capable of. They don't know that every bullet we fire is a promise, to defend our home and to make them pay for underestimating us." Among the men was Sergeant Owen Cole, a sharpshooter with an unerring aim and a quiet demeanor. Owen had fought alongside Raphael in countless skirmishes, and his presence alone was a comfort to the troops. "They'll come in numbers," Owen said, his voice low but steady. "They'll rely on their tech, their arrogance. But we've got something they don't, grit, and the firepower to back it up." Preparations began in earnest. Raphael and his team knew the terrain would be their greatest ally. The Koreans' advanced technology was designed for open battles, not the rugged forests and winding valleys of Earth. Heavy machine guns were mounted in strategic locations, their barrels gleaming in the sunlight. Browning M2S, M240S, and older yet reliable M134 miniguns were cleaned and calibrated. Days later, the Korean invasion fleet arrived, their ships casting massive shadows over Earth's surface. General Varlik watched the planet from the command deck of his flagship, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Begin the landing," he ordered, confident that victory was a foregone conclusion. Korean troops, clad in gleaming armor and wielding energy rifles, descended onto Earth's surface. They marched with precision, their ranks a testament to the Dominion's discipline. The first wave advanced toward a seemingly abandoned human outpost, their scanners detecting no immediate threats. "It's just as I said," Varlik remarked to his officers. "Primitive, predictable, pathetic." But as the Korean forces moved deeper into the valley, the landscape began to change. Trees grew thicker, their towering trunks obscuring visibility. The air grew heavy with an unnatural silence. Then, without warning, the trap was sprung. From hidden positions, human soldiers unleashed a storm of gunfire. The roar of heavy machine guns shattered the stillness, their relentless barrage tearing through alien ranks. Bullets ricocheted off shields, but the Korean quickly realized that their energy barriers were not designed to withstand sustained ballistic onslaughts. Varlik's confidence faltered as reports of heavy casualties poured in. "Impossible," he muttered, his eyes narrowing as he watched the chaos unfold on his tactical display. Raphael stood at the front lines, his voice cutting through the cacophony. "Keep the pressure on. Don't let them regroup." His men obeyed, their movements precise despite the chaos around them. Owen, stationed on a ridge overlooking the battlefield, picked off alien officers with deadly efficiency. Each shot was a calculated move to disrupt the Koreans' chain of command. The aliens, so assured of their superiority, found themselves in disarray. Their energy weapons, designed for swift, decisive strikes, proved inefficient against the relentless rain of bullets. Their formations crumbled, their morale shattered. In the command bunker, Raphael watched the battle unfold, his expression grim but determined. "They came here thinking they could break us," he said to Owen, who had joined him briefly to resupply. "Now they'll see what happens when they push humanity too far." By the day's end, the valley was littered with the wreckage of alien machinery and the bodies of fallen Korean soldiers. The survivors retreated, their once unshakable arrogance replaced by fear. As the humans regrouped, Raphael looked over his men, pride swelling in his chest. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. "We've shown them what we're capable of, but they'll be back. And when they return, we'll be ready." The victory was not just a testament to humanity's resilience, but a declaration to the galaxy. Earth would not fall easily. The Korean had underestimated their enemy, and now, for the first time in centuries, they knew the bitter taste of defeat. The forest trembled under the relentless roar of machine guns. Tracer rounds streaked through the canopy, their fiery arcs painting the shadows in bursts of crimson and gold. The Korean forces, once a pristine wave of order and precision, were now a fractured, panicked mass stumbling through unfamiliar terrain. Their gleaming armor, so impenetrable in theory, crumpled under the sheer ferocity of Earth's metal rain. Captain Raphael Drake held his ground in the thick of the chaos, his rifle barking a steady cadence of defiance. His commands cut through the deafening storm like a blade, directing his men with a clarity born of countless battles. Around him, the defenders of Earth moved with practiced efficiency, their movements a seamless blend of instinct and training. "Reload and cover. Don't let them regroup," Raphael shouted, his voice raw from exertion but unwavering. His eyes darted to Sergeant Owen Cole, positioned at an elevated ridge. Owen's sniper rifle was a quiet, deadly counterpoint to the cacophony below. He tracked the aliens with a predator's patience, his finger tightening on the trigger only when the shot was perfect. One by one, Korean officers fell, their commands silenced before they could be uttered. Left flanks exposed, Owen called through the comms, his tone calm despite the pandemonium. "Reinforcements coming down the ravine." Raphael nodded sharply, his mind racing. The Korean were adapting, testing weak points in the human defenses. He grabbed a field radio and barked orders to a nearby squad. "Dawson, I need suppressing fire on the left. Pin them down before they get too close." A moment later, the thudding chorus of M240 machine guns joined the fray. The firepower was overwhelming, chewing through alien ranks and forcing them into retreat. Raphael felt a flicker of satisfaction, but knew better than to relax. The Korean were resourceful, and their desperation would only make them more dangerous. The aliens, for all their arrogance, were not entirely unskilled. They regrouped in scattered clusters, using energy shields to create makeshift cover. Their plasma rifles spat glowing bolts that seared through the air, forcing the humans to duck and weave. Corporal Jackson, a demolitions expert with a penchant for improvisation, grinned through the grime on his face as he hefted a rocket launcher onto his shoulder. "Think they're smart? Let's see how those shields handle this." The rocket whooshed forward, slamming into the center of a Korean formation. The explosion tore through their defenses, scattering soldiers and debris in all directions. Jackson let out a triumphant whoop before diving back behind cover to reload. Amid the mayhem, Raphael caught sight of a particularly large Korean soldier, an enforcer unit, towering over its companions and wielding a massive plasma cannon. The alien's movements were methodical, its shots carving through trees and soil with brutal precision. "Owen, we've got a problem," Raphael said into the comms, directing his gaze toward the enforcer. "Top priority. Take it out." "I see it," Owen replied, shifting his position for a better angle. He steadied his breath, blocking out the noise around him. The enforcer was armored heavily, its weak points concealed beneath layers of plating. But Owen had seen enough combat to recognize patterns, and he focused on a small, exposed joint at the base of its neck. The rifle's report was sharp and immediate. The enforcer stumbled, a burst of alien ichor sprang from the wound. It roared in pain, its cannon firing wildly before it crumpled to the ground. The humans nearby cheered, their morale bolstered by the sight of the fallen juggernaut. Raphael allowed himself a brief moment of relief before turning his attention back to the larger battle. The Korean were faltering, but they were not defeated. Pockets of resistance remained, their commanders rallying troops for desperate counterattacks. "Cole," Raphael said, his tone grim, "this isn't over yet. They'll throw everything they have left at us. Make every shot count." Owen's response was as steady as ever. "I always do." The rain of bullets continued, relentless and unyielding. Human soldiers worked tirelessly to maintain their weapons, their hands moving with practiced precision despite the chaos. Ammunition was distributed efficiently, each belt of bullets a lifeline in the face of overwhelming odds. At one point, a squad of Korean soldiers managed to breach the defensive line, their energy blades cutting through the underbrush as they charged. Raphael intercepted them, his rifle empty but his resolve unshaken. He drew his sidearm, firing with lethal accuracy as he closed the distance. The last alien fell with a guttural snarl, its blade inches from Raphael's chest. Breathing heavily, he looked around to ensure no more threats lingered before barking new orders. "Reinforce the line. No one gets through." As the battle raged, the Koreans' once flawless formation dissolved into chaos. Their soldiers, so reliant on superior technology, struggled to adapt to Earth's unrelenting tactics. The humans fought like cornered wolves, each man and machine gun a testament to their refusal to surrender. Varlik Dazir, watching the battle from his command ship, clenched his fists in frustration. The scene below was a nightmare, a tide of bullets washing away his elite forces. "How?" he demanded, his voice a mix of disbelief and fury. "How are they holding us back?" The answer, though unspoken, was clear. The humans fought with a tenacity the Korean had never encountered. For every soldier who fell, another rose to take their place, armed with weapons forged not just of metal, but of defiance and determination. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in shadows, Raphael surveyed the aftermath. Smoke curled from the barrels of the heavy guns, and the ground was littered with the remains of alien armor and machinery. The Korean survivors were retreating, their pride shattered alongside their forces. Raphael's voice broke the silence, weary but resolute. "This is what happens when you underestimate us. Spread the word. Earth is not to be trifled with." The men around him nodded, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. The rain of bullets had ended, but the storm it unleashed in the hearts of their enemies was only beginning. The Korean commander, Varlik Dazir, paced the cramped confines of his command chamber, his usually pristine uniform now rumpled and smeared with grime. His golden eyes, once filled with the confidence of a species accustomed to dominance, now darted frantically over the holographic display before him. The map of the battlefield flickered with indicators of failure. Entire units wiped out, key positions overrun, and a growing gap in their once formidable lines. "This is unacceptable," Varlik growled, slamming a clawed fist against the console. The blow sent a shower of sparks into the air, but his fury remained unchecked. How can a species so primitive do this? One of his officers, a smaller Korean with a nervous gait, dared to speak. "Commander, the humans fight with a savagery we did not anticipate. Their weapons, though rudimentary, are devastating in their simplicity. Our forces are struggling to adapt." Varlik's glare could have cut through steel. Struggling? They are dying, Kirix. Struggling implies hope. Do you see hope in this mess? Kirix lowered his gaze, his mandibles clicking anxiously. "No, Commander. But if we consolidate our forces and focus on their flanks..." "Enough!" Varlik barked, cutting him off. He gestured toward the hologram, where another Korean battalion was being decimated by a relentless barrage of machine gun fire. "Our forces are in disarray. Consolidation would mean retreat. Do you suggest we flee like cowards?" Kirix hesitated but said nothing more. Meanwhile, on the ground, the remaining Korean soldiers were caught in a nightmare of steel and fire. Their once unified ranks had splintered into small, isolated groups, each desperately trying to regroup under the humans' relentless assault. Plasma rifles hissed and cracked, their glowing bolts piercing the darkness, but the humans seemed to anticipate every move. Sergeant Greylick's car, a seasoned veteran of the Korean forces, crouched behind a shattered tree trunk, his breathing labored and his armor dented from near misses. He looked to the few soldiers who remained under his command, young, untested recruits whose faces were etched with fear. "Hold your ground," Greylicks barked, his voice sharp and commanding. "We are Korean warriors. We do not yield. But they're everywhere," one of the recruits stammered, his weapon trembling in his hands. "Their guns, they don't stop." Greylicks grabbed the young soldier by the shoulder, his grip firm. "Focus. Aim true. If we fall here, it will be because we stopped fighting, not because they overpowered us." The recruit nodded weakly, though his hands still shook. Above the battlefield, Varlik's command ship hovered like a predator circling its prey. From its vantage point, the devastation below was painfully clear. The Korean forces were being systematically dismantled, their technological superiority rendered meaningless by the humans' sheer tenacity and unyielding will. Varlik turned to his communications officer. "Deploy the remaining enforcer units. All of them. This is our last chance to turn the tide." The officer hesitated. "Commander, if we commit all enforcers now, we will have no reserve should this." "Do it," Varlik roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The humans are winning because they do not fear loss. If we are to match them, we must embrace the same resolve." On the ground, Raphael Drake and his men had secured a temporary lull in the fighting, though the air still buzzed with tension. The soldiers worked quickly to resupply their positions, knowing the Korean would not retreat without a final, desperate attempt to reclaim the field. "Stay sharp," Raphael warned, his voice low but firm. "They're regrouping. This isn't over." Sure enough, the distant sound of heavy, mechanical footsteps began to echo through the trees. The enforcers had arrived. These towering units, clad in reinforced armor and armed with devastating plasma cannons, were the Koreans' answer to human resilience, a sledgehammer to shatter the human defenses. Raphael exchanged a glance with Owen Cole, who was perched on a nearby ridge with his sniper rifle. "Think you can punch through that armor?" Owen smirked faintly, his calm demeanor unshaken. "I'll find a way." The enforcers advanced steadily, their hulking forms cutting through the forest like titans. Behind them, the remaining Korean infantry rallied, their confidence bolstered by the imposing presence of their elite units. Raphael didn't wait for the attack to reach his lines. "Open fire," he commanded, and the forest erupted once more in a symphony of gunfire. Heavy machine guns roared to life, their bullets hammering against the enforcers' armor. The smaller Korean soldiers fell in droves, unable to withstand the sheer volume of fire, but the enforcers pushed forward undeterred. Their plasma cannons unleashed torrents of energy, carving through trees and earth with terrifying ease. "Jackson, we need explosives on those things," Raphael shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Corporal Jackson grinned, hefting a satchel charge as if it were a toy. "On it, sir." Jackson moved with surprising agility for a man carrying enough explosives to level a building. He darted between cover, his movements a dance of practiced precision, until he was within striking distance of the nearest enforcer. With a well-practiced motion, he lobbed the satchel charge onto the enforcer's back and dove for cover. The explosion was deafening, the shockwave flattening nearby foliage. When the smoke cleared, the enforcer lay in a twisted heap, its armor shattered and its weapons silenced. A cheer went up among the human soldiers, but Raphael quickly brought them back to focus. "Stay on them. There's more where that came from." The battle raged on, the humans refusing to give an inch despite the overwhelming power of the enforcers. Owen picked off key targets with unerring accuracy, each shot a testament to his deadly skill. Jackson continued to wreak havoc with his explosives, turning the Caridans' own strength against them. Through it all, Raphael remained at the front, his rifle never silent and his resolve never wavering. The Caridan, for all their desperation, could not break the human line. As the final enforcer fell, its massive frame collapsing with a thunderous crash, the Caridan soldiers hesitated. Their confidence was shattered, their will to fight eroded by the unrelenting ferocity of their human adversaries. Varlik, watching from above, felt the weight of defeat settle over him. His claws dug into the armrests of his chair as he stared at the battlefield below. The Caridan forces were broken, their arrogance ground into the dirt alongside their fallen comrades. For the first time in his life, Varlik Dazir felt fear, not just for himself, but for his people. The humans were not the weak, primitive species they had been led to believe. They were something far more dangerous, a force that could not be intimidated or subdued. With a heavy heart, Varlik issued the command he had never thought he would give. "All remaining forces fall back. We have lost this battle." On the ground, Raphael watched as the surviving Caridan began to retreat, their once mighty presence reduced to scattered, fleeing remnants. He lowered his weapon, his chest heaving with exhaustion, but his eyes hard with determination. "Let them run," he said quietly. "They'll remember this day for the rest of their lives." The humans stood victorious, battered but unbroken, their victory a testament to the indomitable spirit of Earth's defenders. As the smoke of battle began to clear, the forest lay in solemn silence, broken only by the faint crackle of dying fires and the low groans of the wounded. Raphael Drake stood at the center of his unit's hastily secured perimeter, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His face, streaked with dirt and sweat, betrayed no emotion. Around him, the remaining soldiers moved with grim efficiency, securing their positions and tending to their comrades. The comms crackled to life, interrupting the heavy quiet. "Commander Drake, you're going to want to hear this," came the voice of Lieutenant Bennett, stationed at the temporary communications hub. Raphael strode to the console, his boots crunching against the charred ground. "Go ahead," he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion creeping into his limbs. "We've intercepted a transmission from the Zendar flagship," Bennett explained. "It's their commander. He's requesting a ceasefire." Raphael's brow furrowed. "Requesting or demanding?" "Requesting, sir," Bennett confirmed. "It seems they've had enough." A faint murmur rippled through the gathered soldiers as the news spread. Raphael turned to his second-in-command, Sergeant Owen Cole, whose sharp eyes reflected cautious optimism. "What do you think?" Raphael asked. Owen shrugged, his tone measured. "They're beaten, no doubt about it. But we can't assume they're sincere. Desperation makes people, aliens too, do unpredictable things." Raphael nodded, his mind already turning over the possibilities. "Let's see what they have to say. Patch me through to their commander." A moment later, the alien's voice filled the comms. It was deep and resonant, tinged with a mixture of weariness and reluctant respect. This is Commander Varlik Dazir of the Zendar fleet. I am reaching out to negotiate terms of surrender." Raphael leaned closer to the console, his voice cold and unyielding. "Negotiate? After the slaughter you brought to this battlefield. You think we're interested in negotiating?" There was a pause on the other end, filled with static and tension. When Varlik spoke again, his tone was measured, almost pleading. "Commander Drake, I acknowledge the actions of my forces. We underestimated your people. That was a grave mistake, one for which we have paid dearly. But further bloodshed will serve neither of us." Raphael's jaw tightened. Images of fallen comrades flashed in his mind, their sacrifices fresh and raw. "Your surrender will not erase what you've done," he said. "And it won't bring back the men and women who died because of you." "No," Varlik admitted, "but it can prevent more from joining them. You have proven your strength, Commander. Humanity has proven its strength. If we continue this fight, it will only end in mutual destruction. Is that what you want?" The weight of the question hung in the air, pressing down on Raphael. Around him, his soldiers watched silently, their faces a mixture of anger and hope. He glanced at Owen, whose expression offered no easy answers. "We'll consider your surrender," Raphael said finally. "But make no mistake, this isn't about mercy. It's about ensuring you never set foot on our planet again." "Understood," Varlik replied. "I will send representatives to discuss the terms. Unarmed, you'd better," Raphael warned, "because if I so much as catch a whiff of treachery, I'll make sure your fleet burns to the last ship." The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Raphael turned to his men. "We're not celebrating yet. Stay sharp and keep your positions. This isn't over until I say it is." Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a small Zendar delegation emerged from the forest under a flag of truce. They were a pitiful sight, wounded, unarmed, and visibly shaken. At their head was Kirix, his once proud stature diminished by the weight of defeat. Raphael and his men met them in a neutral clearing, weapons at the ready. The humans formed a tight, imposing line, their presence a stark reminder of the force that had broken the Zendar. Kirix stepped forward, his golden eyes meeting Raphael's steely gaze. "Commander Drake," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "on behalf of the Zendar forces, I formally offer our unconditional surrender." The words hung in the air, their significance sinking in. Raphael studied the alien for a long moment before speaking. "And what guarantees do we have that you won't turn on us the moment you've regrouped?" "You have my word," Kirix said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Our fleet is in disarray. Our soldiers are demoralized. Continuing this fight would be futile." Owen leaned in, his voice low. "We should make sure they can't regroup, Raphael. Disarm them, strip their tech, and send them limping back to wherever they came from." Raphael nodded. "Agreed. Kirix, your forces will disarm immediately. All weapons, vehicles, and remaining enforcers are to be turned over to us. Your fleet will depart our system within the next 48 hours. Fail to comply, and we finish what we started." Kirix inclined his head, his mandibles clicking in a gesture of reluctant acceptance. "It will be done." As the Zendar delegation retreated to relay the terms, Raphael turned to his men. "We've won the battle, but this war isn't over. They'll remember today, and so will we. Let's make sure they never forget what happens when they challenge humanity." The soldiers nodded, their expressions a mixture of pride and resolve. The weight of their victory was tempered by the losses they had endured, but it was a victory nonetheless. Back on the battlefield, as the Zendar began to disarm under the watchful eyes of human soldiers, Raphael allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought of the men and women who had given their lives, their sacrifices etched into the scorched earth beneath his feet. "This isn't the end," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the distant hum of the retreating Zendar fleet. "But it's a start." As the first Zendar ships departed the atmosphere, the soldiers of Earth stood tall, their determination unshaken. They had faced the might of an alien empire and emerged victorious. And though the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, they knew one thing with absolute certainty: humanity would endure.